Well, hello everybody, and this is Auntie. And today we're going to be talking about a case that is going on right now. It is really, really sad. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be talking about Brennan Banfield and an au pair from hell. And we're going to be talking about the unfortunate events that happened to Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. Stick around. Let's talk about it. Let me know what you have to say downtown in the chat. This is a live feed, and I thank you in advance for being here. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button, like, and let's get into it, shall we? Oh, yes, we shall. A sweet old auntie. Thank you, subscribers, and my consistent refuge. All the y'all who have been here through the long. Shall we get into it? Oh, yes, we shall. It's time for auntie to rise. Sweet old. It's time for auntie to rise. It's time for auntie to rise. Welcome back, everybody. Let's get started. This story does not begin with blood. It begins with routine. On the surface, the Banfield family lived an unremarkable life in Virginia, a suburban community in Fairfax County, known more for commuter traffic and good schools than crime. Their townhouse or their home sat in a row of similar houses, um, indistinguishable from the others unless you knew what would later happen inside. Christine Banfield was 37 years old. She was a registered nurse who worked in critical care. Her job required a calm presence in chaos and a precise understanding of how injuries occur, how evidence is preserved, and how stories unravel when facts do not align. So, outside of work, she was a wife, a mother, deeply structured, protective of her child, and described by those who knew her as cautious rather than impulsive. Her husband, Brendan Banfield, worked as a criminal investigator for the Internal Revenue Service. He was trained in firearms, investigative procedure, and evidence handling. He understood how scenes were processed, how statements are evaluated, and how law enforcement narratives form in the hours immediately after violence. Because the two of them had such prestigious jobs and busy hours, the two of them decided to hire an au pair, to help them to take care of their little girl, Valerie. And they employed her. Her name is Juliana Perez. She's a young woman who came from Brazil who helped care for their daughter and lived inside their home. She was basically woven into the daily rhythms of the household, including the meals schedule, the childcare routine, etc. Nothing outwardly suggested any instability until February of 2023. So Joseph Ryan, let me show you all a picture of him. Let me bring him up. So Joseph Ryan did not know Christine Banfield in real life. They were not friends. They didn't have shared friends. no overlapping social circles, no history between the two of them. What connected them existed entirely online. Ryan was active on FetLife. It's a niche social networking platform built around fetish communities, BDSM interests, and consensual role play. FetLife differs from conventional dating apps in one critical way. Users are expected to negotiate boundaries, consent, and expectations in explicit detail before meeting in person. These encounters, arranged through the platform, are typically preceded by long conversations designed to establish trust and safety. Ryan account show recent communications with a profile using Christine Banfield's name and photographs. The messages were explicit. They framed a consensual encounter. They discussed a meeting at her home. At the time, nothing about this appeared unusual to Ryan. What he did not know was that the woman he believed that he was communicating with had no record of those conversations on her phone. On February 24th, 2023, on the morning of February 24th, Christine Banfield was at home doing what she do with the whoop whoop and a boop boop boop. The morning followed an ordinary rhythm, domestic, unscripted, familiar. While Joseph Ryan arrived at the Banfield townhouse expecting a private consensual encounter with an adult who had invited him, there was no forced entry. The facts would later become foundational. Ryan was let inside. What happened next unfolded quickly but cleanly. Christine Banfield was stabbed multiple times. The medical examiner would later determine that her injuries included defensive wounds to her hands and arms, indicating she was conscious during part of the attack and attempted to protect herself. The injuries were close range and sustained. Joseph Ryan was shot multiple times inside the home. The firearm used belonged to Brendan Banfield. Both Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan passed away inside of that home. After the violence ended, Brandon Banfield called 911. He identified himself, reported that an intruder had attacked his wife, and stated that he had to intervene. When police arrived, the scene appeared to support his account. At least initially it did. A deceased woman, a deceased male stranger, a husband who claimed to have stopped an attack. Brendan Banfield was not arrested that day. I think one of the things that alarmed me about this case after watching the body cam footage, was the au pair who, by first sight, you would appear that she was extremely afraid. But now, having more of the story, it was all an act. And you can see that it was absolutely an act. Y'all let me know down in the comments what you all think about this. You know, it's amazing because a lot of men have a fantasy of having something that they believe is better and prettier than their own wife. Christine was absolutely beautiful, talented, loving mom. And this is the fantasy that her husband had. Someone who has bleached blonde, damaged hair, cheap lipstick, fake eyelashes. Why do some men believe that what they have is not good enough and that they absolutely have to have something else? As the scene was processed and the house sealed, detectives began to confront a problem that would not resolve itself. Joseph Ryan had not forced his way inside, yet someone had let him in. Investigators turned to Christine Banfield's phone. If she had invited a stranger into her home, there would be evidence, messages, deleted threads, apps removed in haste. But none of that was found on her phone. Her phone showed routine communication, work, family logistics, nothing sexual, nothing secretive. The absence of evidence became evidence all by itself. Ryan's phone told a different story of that confirmed his FetLife activities, right? And the existence of the profile he believed belonged to Christine. The messages existed, but Christine's participation did not. Did not. So y'all, the investigation had to shift. Digital forensic specialists examined metadata, login patterns, and device access. The FedLife account could not be cleanly attributed to Christine. Access points did not align with her routine or her devices. And so the attention turned inward. Who had access to Christine's photos? Who knew her schedule? Who would convincingly impersonate her? Investigators re examined the household. Juliana, the au pair, had been present that morning. She alleges that she had taken the child downstairs shortly before the violence and she had not been injured. A deeper search of the home revealed personal items belonging to Juliana in the marital bedroom. When questioned again, Juliana admitted she was having a sexual relationship with Brendan Banfield. That admission reframed the entire case. During her testimony on the stand, we discovered that this plot had been going on for quite a while, that they were actually going to gun ranges and talking and plotting this demise for a while. During the or on the police cam footage, we saw Juliana say that she had taken their daughter to the zoo or out on an excursion. While she was there, she forgot the lunch and came back home to the home. When she came back, she said that she saw a man going to the house. And at this time, she decided to call Brennan, who was conveniently down the street at the local McDonald's, of all places. Brendan came back to the house and this altercation ensued. And at this time, Juliana never admitted that she was part of this case, part of this demise, part of everything. Now, the average person who looked at this footage knew exactly what was going on. Her reactions, in my opinion, seemed very dramatized and just over the top. They did not match the moment, if you will. But Juliana did her best to play that game. But those of us that know, we know. Investigators examined Brandon's devices. Deleted messages were partially recovered. Communication patterns aligned with the timing of the FetLife account's activity. While the analysts could not definitively attribute every message, they could establish opportunity, access, and motive. Divorce would have carried financial consequences. This was also echoed by the au pair, who indicated that he told her that he wanted to leave his wife. He was not happy, but that it was going to be costly and he didn't want to pay the money to do a proper. He said that it was not even in the question. Divorce was not even in the question. Now, as we all know, he has been introduced as a IRS agent, but she was working in the hospital. Not sure whether or not she came from a family who had great means, but absolutely it would have been upside down. We also have discovered since the trial has started that he absolutely did not want his wife to have his child. Yet, it appears he wanted a whorish au pair to be the mother. One of the things that disgusted me the most about this, you all, is the fact that she moved into that woman's room, which by all accounts and crime scene footage was completely covered in the blood of Christine and Joseph. Disgusting. Disgusting. Christine continued presence stood in the way of Brendan and Julia being together. Juliana was arrested months after the killing. At first, she denied planning anything. Over time, confronted with evidence, her account quickly changed. She admitted knowing Joseph Ryan was coming. She admitted facilitating the circumstances. And she admitted firing the gun. She told investigators that the plan had always centered on Christine. Juliana pleaded guilty to manslaughter in exchange for her cooperation. Brendan Banfield was arrested and charged with aggravated murder. The trial, which is currently going on in Fairfax County Circuit Court, unfolded slowly but deliberately. Initially, the case was supposed to start, the trial was supposed to start in October, but as we all know, it just started last week. Prosecutors began with the invitations. They explained the FetLife, the communications, and why Ryan would believe the meeting was legitimate. They showed the messages. Then they showed Christine's phone, silent, empty of corroboration. They were actually using Christine's computer to set all of this up. The two of them had on purpose sought Joseph Ryan out as the couple began, to search and do research on someone who would be willing to come into the home to commit this crime for them. They needed someone to prove something. Now, one of the things that I have left out is that Christine has always had a blood problem. I believe that she had an issue with bleeding. Her father, who had taken this stand, I believe it was yesterday, had talked about her history with bleeding out, having nosebleeds, and not being able to participate in the regular things that other children did. Christine, of course, if you know someone who has a problem with clotting, that you have to be very careful about what they do, what they engage in, and all that. Now, of course, her husband knew about that. It is said during the trial that Christine, moments before she passed away, told them, "It's no need for you all to do anything else. I'm going to die anyway." Only because she knew that she would bleed out. Absolutely disgusting that this husband, who has such a prestigious job, would not just leave and continue his affair with this au pair. One of the things about the au pair that I don't like personally, and y'all know I've got to throw myself into this, is her ability to act as if she is innocent and does not understand and cannot speak the English language. She is so um, uh, it's so disgusting. It is so disgusting. This man, instead of taking her life, could have just divorced. One of the things that I did not tell you is that while they were committing this crime, they had her 4-year-old daughter in the house. They strategically placed her downstairs in the basement so that she would not see. What they think has not, that I believe they think that none of this has affected her. Maybe at the age of 4, she was not able to process what was happening, the noises, the loud bangs, the moaning, the groaning, the screaming, the murder. But years from now, that all will come back. Years from now, she will be able to see that her father, that in one day, she lost both her mother and her father. This will not be something that will just simply go away because the daughter was not there to see it. As we all know, the daughter probably could hear a lot of things that she cannot explain to herself now. But after a while, all of the puzzle pieces will come together. While I'm talking about that, I am hoping and praying that she always stays in a safe environment around people who actually love her. This old pair did not love her. And from my assessment, and in my opinion, neither did her father. Because what dad would ever concoct such a plan and not have the daughter outside of the home? He thought that he was getting a complete and total bombshell. But all of this was just made up. This girl is extremely unattractive. And now the real au pair from Brazil sits before us. What a disappointment she has to be to her family in Brazil, who put everything on the line to ensure that she could come to America to be an au pair for a prestigious couple in Virginia. Anyway, let me get back to the story. Forensic experts testified about bloodstain patterns and movements within the home. The medical examiner described Christine's injuries in detail, emphasizing the defensive wounds and the duration of the attack. Juliana testified. She admitted her own guilt. She described the affair, the planning conversations, and the events of February 24th. The defensive attacked her credibility. The defense emphasized her plea deal and the limits of digital attribution. They highlighted Brennan's 911 call and lack of prior violence. Again and again, the jury returned the same question: why was Joseph Ryan there? In the weeks following the death, investigators did not rush to come to a conclusion. This was not a case that could be solved by speed. It required patience, repetition, and pressure applied slowly enough that stories had room to contradict themselves. Juliana was interviewed multiple times. At first, her role was described as minimal. She positioned herself as a frightened bystander, someone caught inside a situation she did not understand and did not control. Her tone was cautious, her answers were short. She framed Brendan Banfield as the dominant figure in the household and herself as a dependent presence. Investigators let her talk. They asked the same questions. just in slightly different ways or different days watching for drift. They noted when details changed and when they stayed fixed. They watched her body language. When Christine's Banfield's name was even mentioned, when Joseph Ryan's name was mentioned, and when Brendan Banfield's name was mentioned. At the same time, detectives interviewed Brendan Banfield. His demeanor was calm, structured, and deliberate. After all, he was an agent for the IRS. And you know how the IRS is when they want to get your money, take your money, review your money. They know how to be calm, cool, and collective. Okay. I went off a little bit, but I'm back. Brendan spoke in complete sentences. He anticipated questions before they were fully asked. He described events in a linear fashion that sounded practiced, even when he insisted it wasn't. Investigators noticed that Brendan rarely expressed confusion. He did not speculate. He did not contradict himself. Instead, he returned repeatedly to the same narrative: an intruder, a sudden attack, and a defensive response. That consistency, which might normally be reassuring to a police officer, became something investigators examined closely. In chaotic situation, memory fractures. Brendan did not. He didn't have any. As digital evidence continued to be analyzed, investigators began confronting Juliana with specific times, locations, messages. They showed her photographs recovered from the devices. They referenced moments she had previously omitted. And then y'all know what happened next. Her whole story began to change. She admitted the affair in full. She admitted that it was not impulsive or brief, but ongoing. She described conversations about the future, about Christine, about what life would look like if the circumstances were different. And eventually, she acknowledged knowing Joseph Ryan was coming to the house that morning. And that admission marked a point of no return. Digital forensic and analysts reconstructed activity across devices, not to assign moral blame, but to understand sequence. They mapped logins, deletions, and overlaps. They tracked when Christine's photographs were accessed and from where. They examined how the FetLife account interacted with Ryan's profile and how these interactions aligned with household schedules. They could not testify with certainty who typed every word, but what they could testify to was opportunity. The account completely aligned with moments when Christine was not even using her phone. It aligned with times when other members of the household had access to these shared devices. It aligned with the planning window that culminated in February of 2004. Investigators did not need a perfect digital footprint. They needed a coherent explanation, and that explanation forming was this: Joseph Ryan had been invited under false pretense that someone was using Christine Bansfield's identity, and they used it into a situation to be designed to appear consensual until it turned violent. Confronted with the weight of the evidence, Juliana whole posture change. She no longer minimized her involvement. She spoke about fear: fear of Brendan, fear of consequences, fear of what would happen if she didn't comply. How convenient when weeks after the woman is deceased, you are sleeping in her bed with a picture of you and Brendan at the bedside table. Yes, you heard me correctly. This au pair who alleges that she was forced decided after the passing of little Valerie's mother, Brendan's wife, that she would climb into the bed with him and sleep with him every night under the same roof. Now, y'all know there's some choice words that I could use, but I'm really trying to keep this high level. If you would just allow me, let me bring up the picture of the au pair and the bedside table. Just 1 second, please. Let's see if we can find that picture. This is a picture that she had at the bedside table days. Okay, why did I come here? Just 1 second. The audacity. You all will see. This has been marked Exhibit 11C. I'm going to share it. As you all can see, this is the picture of her, Christina's bedside table, and the au pair with her husband. As I was saying, the evidence and the weight thereof made Juliana change her whole posture. She admitted that she had taken the child downstairs deliberately. She admitted she knew violence would occur, even if she claimed she did not fully understand how it would unfold. She admitted firing the gun. Her statements were no longer framed as confusion, they were framed as confession. In exchange for cooperation, prosecutors offered a plea manslaughter deal for her. Juliana accepted it, and Brendan Banfield was arrested shortly thereafter. When the trial began this last week, the courtroom atmosphere was restrained. There was not a spectacle, it was methodical. Methodical, I'm sorry. Jurors were instructed to listen, not to react, to weigh evidence, not and not emotional. The prosecution opened by dismantling the original narrative piece by piece. They did not accuse Brendan Banfield immediately. They focused instead on absence of forced entry, absence of digital corroboration, and absence of Christine's participation. They introduced FetLife carefully, explaining its purpose and culture so that jurors would understand why Joseph Ryan believed the invitation was legitimate. And they also took the time to explain why there was nothing wrong with Joseph Ryan being a consenting adult to even be into such a fetish. Then they introduced Christine's phone again. Witness by witness, the crime scene analyst described bloodstain direction and distribution, explaining how movements within the house contradicted the intruder narrative. The medical examiner testified about Christine's injuries, emphasizing duration, proximity, and defensive wounds. Juliana testified for hours. She did not dramatize. She admitted guilt. She described the affair, the planning conversations, and her role on the morning of February 24th. But one of the things that I noticed while she was trying to appear to be convincing, if you will, there was a lot of things she couldn't remember. I don't recall. I don't remember. Really? You can remember that which you agreed to do in the plea deal, but anything outside of that, she couldn't remember. Hmm. How au pair of you. Anyway, Auntie, stay focused. Cross examined focused on her plea deal. The defense reminded the jury again and again that her freedom depended on her testimony. Brendan Banfield has not testified yet, but believe it or not, he will be. As the trial is progressing, one question is on everybody's mind. This came up on everybody's mind, in my opinion, with every witness, every exhibit, every argument. Again, why was Joseph there? The jury has not been asked to decide whether Brendan was unfaithful. They were asked to decide whether the original story could survive the evidence. The first formal interrogation of Julia did not resemble the confrontations people imagined from television. There was no raised voices, no immediate accusations. The room was small, neutral, intentionally unremarkable. Just a table, two chairs, a recorder placed carefully between them. Investigators had begun with background. Her arrival in the United States, her role in the Banfield household, her daily responsibilities. They let time stretch out. Silence was allowed to linger after all of the questions and all of the answers. Juliana strategically, in my opinion, spoke softly. She described herself as grateful for the opportunity to live with the Banfields, to care for their child, to experience life in America. When asked about February 24th, she framed herself as this frightened and confused woman. She said she heard noise upstairs. She said she took the child downstairs instinctively out of fear. The investigators didn't challenge her immediately. Instead, they circled back later asking why that instinct occurred at that specific moment. Why before the violence, not after? Why with such precision over multiple interviews? The questions became more detailed. Investigators asked about her relationship with Brendan. At first, she denied everything and anything beyond just a normal friendship and a boss employee relationship. But when that ass was confronted with recovered messages, she paused longer before answering. And then her language shifted and she acknowledged intimacy, but described it as brief, emotional, something that happened without planning. They showed her photographs recovered from devices, images she had assumed were deleted, just gone. They asked her to explain timelines and she struggled. And the room got quieter, tighter, smaller. And by the third interview, Juliana stopped denying the affair. She admitted it was ongoing. She admitted it involved secrecy. She admitted conversations about Christine that were not kind, not neutral, not distant. When the investigators asked her about Joseph Ryan, she initially claimed she did not know why he was there. They didn't argue with her. They simply placed the FetLife messages in front of her. They were printed, dated, explicit. And of course, y'all know what happened. Juliana stared at her for a long time. Eventually, she said she knew he was coming. And that one sentence changed the entire case. Once investigators knew to look inward at this couple, the digital examination became exhaustive. Analysts did not rely on one single device. They constructed activity across phones, laptops, shared household electronics, and network access points. They examined when Christine photographs were accessed, cropped, and uploaded. They mapped those moments against Christine's work schedule, her sleep patterns, and her phone uses. They noted discrepancies, activities occurring when Christine was documented elsewhere. They analyzed the FetLife account itself, profile creation, message cadence, patterns, the timeliness of response. They compared that activity to Brendan's device usage. Deletions did not erase everything. Fragments remained. Overlaps emerged. The goal was not to prove who typed each word. The goal was to understand whether Joseph Ryan's arrival could be explained without deception. It could not. The account used Christine's identity convincingly enough to bypass suspicion. It leveraged her photographs, her home, her implied consent. Ryan believed the encounter was legitimate because the platform he used depended on negotiated trust. Investigators concluded that Ryan did not stumble into the Banfield home. He was directed and lured there. If you are liking this video, please hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe for more true crime. Thank you. Let's continue. In later interviews, Juliana's demeanor began to change, right, you all? She spoke about fear of Brendan, fear of being sent home, fear of consequences she did not fully understand at the time. She described conversations that felt hypothetical when they occurred, but terrifying in retrospect. She admitted that taking the child downstairs was not instinctual, but it was intentional. She admitted she knew violence would occur, even if she claimed she did not participate. Although we know that she did, because prior to the two of them carrying out this murder, they had went to the gun range twice, not once, twice. And at the gun range, she had a 9mm firearm that she was training on. They came back a second time, and she trained with the same firearm. And as testimony would have it, Brendan went back to the same gun range and purchased the one that she had practiced on. Although Juliana, in the early onset, said that she didn't have anything to do with this. We later discovered during testimony that she was the one who fired the second shot. She said that she had asked Brendan, "Why do I need to have a firearm?" He said, "Just in case the other one doesn't work." Really? But she was innocent. She was afraid. She was coerced. She wanted her job. She appreciated being here in America, but yet she worked with him to do this. Girl, I ain't got this to do. When asked about the gun, she closed her eyes. She said she fired it. They say that her reaction and confession was not a bunch of theatrics, but it was resigned. Prosecutors offered a plea agreement, manslaughter, cooperation testimony, and she accepted. The first day of the trial began quietly. Jurors filed in, eye contact with the gallery. The courtroom was restrained, almost clinical. Opening statements did not begin with accusation. The prosecution began with the house, the layout, the absence of forced entry, the improbability of Christine's participation in the story first told. They explained that FetLife emphasized the consent, negotiation, and trust. They framed Joseph Ryan not as reckless, but as someone operating within the expectations of the platform that he used. They showed Christine's phone, which was empty. The defense followed with restraint of their own. They acknowledged the tragedy. They emphasized chaos. They described her husband returning to violence and acting to protect his family. They urged jurors not to confuse infidelity with murder. But as the trial continued, witness by witness, the narrative slowed. Each piece of evidence was placed deliberately. Each contradiction was allowed to sit with the jury. Christine Banfield's absence filled the room. Joseph Ryan's presence demanded an explanation and an apology. And Brendan Banfield's story was measured against the evidence one careful step at a time. The medical examiner, y'all, took the stand on the morning when the courtroom felt heavier than it had the day before. There was no visible reaction when the witness was sworn in, but the jurors shifted in their seats. Everyone understood what this testimony required them to hear. This is always, for me, the most challenging part of looking at any case or any court case. Like, for me, this has always been and probably will always be the hardest part for me. Always. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section. The medical examiner began not with conclusion, but with process, training, experience, the responsibility to describe injury without interpretation. Christine Banfield's autopsy was presented methodically. The examiner described each wound in sequence, explaining location, depth, and trajectory. Christine had been stabbed multiple times. Some wounds were immediately life-threatening, while others were not. The examiner explained that this distinction mattered because it showed time. Christine had remained conscious during part of the attack. The cuts on her hands and forearms were identified as defensive injuries, the natural response of someone attempting to protect themselves, to save their own life. There was no evidence of restraint, no evidence of consensual injury. The wounds were consistent with a violent assault at close range. When asked about timing, the examiner explained that death was not instantaneous, that Christine experienced every minute of the attack. And the courtroom was in complete silence. The medical examiner examined and talked about Joseph Ryan injuries, multiple gunshot wounds. The examiner explained entrance room exit wounds and the absence of injuries that would suggest prolonged struggle before the shots were even fired. The examiner did not speculate about motive because that was not their role. They spoke only to what the body showed. And what it showed contradicted the idea of a sudden chaotic intrusion. The crime scene analyst testified next, bringing diagrams and photographs that turned the courtroom into a reconstruction of the Banfield home. And jurors were guided room by room. Bloodstain patterns were explained carefully, directionally. Volume, transfer marks. Analysts described where blood was found and, just as importantly, where it wasn't. The patterns suggested moments after entry. They suggested pauses. They suggested actions taken not in panic, but in sequence, in a semi-planned order. Analysts examined why the intrusive narrative struggled to account for what they had observed: the absence of forced entry, the lack of disarray consistent with a sudden struggle beginning at the door, the location of Joseph Ryan's body in relation to the shooting. The home did not tell the story Brendan Banfield and Juliana initially described. When Juliana returned to the stand for cross-examination, the tone shifted. The defense attorney did not raise their voice. They did not accuse. They questioned. They asked Juliana about her plea deal, about the sentence she avoided, about the benefit of cooperation. Juliana acknowledged it all. They asked her why her story changed, why she initially denied the affair, why she initially denied knowing Joseph Ryan was coming. Juliana, of course, said she was afraid of Brendan, afraid of losing everything, afraid of what would happen if she told the truth. The defense suggested she was still afraid of prison. And guess what? She didn't even argue about it. She repeated that she fired the gun. She took the child downstairs intentionally, that she knew violence would occur. The defense pressed on digital evidence on uncertainty. Juliana agreed the messages could not be traced to a single hand. She said that did not change why Joseph Ryan was there. As the days, y'all, have continued, this trial is going at a steady rhythm. The evidence is introduced methodically, slowly, and the jurors are given time to absorb each piece. The prosecution returned repeatedly to absence. The absence of Christine's participation, the absence of cooperation, the absence of an explanation that did not require deception. The defense returned repeatedly to doubt about Juliana, doubt about digital certainty, and doubt about her motives, which equals her intent. Let me just say this. When Monday comes, as we all know, we have had a lot of snow and ice. This is the opportunity where they have rested. And now we're going to hear from Brendan Banfield. Yes, I'm sure you're asking, Auntie, he's going to testify on his behalf? Absolutely, he will. And when he does, we will be back here, same time, same station, to talk about it. We will also be back to talk about his sentencing. I want to thank you all so much for following me here, for your subscribe, and for your like, for your comment, and for hyping the videos. In the meantime, let's continue to pray for baby Valerie. We're going to be praying for Christine's family and for Joseph, because there's nothing wrong with having fetishes or different things that you're involved in. No one should be judged and killed for that. These two should be judged and jailed for that. There's one other thing that I want to leave you all with. Juliana, on the last day, was confronted by the prosecuting office. And she said something that really bothered me, but something I felt like I already knew. Juliana has said that she's been talking with different networks to do a Netflix series. This woman's trial is not even over. Her family and friends and co-workers are still hurting. and she is thinking about a Netflix deal, has already been trying to talk to different production companies and a book writer, someone to write about this story. How disgusting. How absolutely disgusting. We'll be keeping up with this story. Again, thank you so much for being here. And until we meet again, y'all be safe out there in those streets. Bye, y'all.